Good morning. It's 10 a.m. and time to begin our workshop for the State Textbook Commission. Great to see everyone here this morning and relatively dry on the soggy morning. We have a new person sitting among us today. Elizabeth Taylor is the new staff attorney for the Department of Education, and we welcome Elizabeth. Glad you're with us. Okay, the first item on the workshop is to discuss the possibility of closing the textbook collection sites, since all samples will be available for public inspection online, beginning with the 2014 through 16 Section A adoption cycle. And Monty Wilson's going to speak to this item.
Good morning. Okay.
Recognize and,
yes. Monty Wilson, Deputy Director of Content and Resources for the Tennessee Department of Education. One of the items that has been discussed recently within the department has been the possibility of closing the collection sites across the state. The collection sites' purpose, of course, is to house and provide materials for public review. Those are located in different regions throughout the state. Our main site is MTSU, which at that site we of course would not close. The other sites we have talked about possibly doing so. The reason for that is that based on the legislation that was passed this past spring, is that all textbooks and all resources that should be under review for the public and for any teachers, including the advisory panel, have to be made available online 100%. By doing so, that would somewhat negate having to have an official copy at all of the different sites across the state. In our discussion at the department, it is seen as if those materials are made available online, do we need to have extra copies and extra sites throughout Tennessee for the public, because the public can view them at any point in time electronically. And of course the question came up was, does everybody have electronic access? And while they may not have it in their homes, the fact that they would have that in public libraries across Tennessee, the materials would all be available online, and currently we have revised how we receive feedback from the public for textbooks and instructional resources, and that's available online through a survey document where it's more fill in the blank, fill in the field, as opposed to fill out a hard copy, find somebody's name and address, stamp, and get that in the mail. So at this time, we wanted to make the Textbook Commission aware of the possibility of us moving in that direction and make sure that we addressed any questions or concerns that you had in regards to possibly making this move for the next adoption cycle, which would be Cycle A, which would be upcoming here at the conclusion of the math cycle. So at this point, really, I would just ask the Commission if you have any questions or concerns. We would like to know what those are to make sure that we make a decision that best supports the review process for those in Tennessee.
I remember when we did the social studies adoption, part of the feelings for the public was that they would go to sites and the book wasn't there, or it was a slightly different version, or that sort of thing. And I think that this could prevent some confusion. I mean, is the main purpose, so that's one potential benefit. It would always be the latest copy that is up for review. Is the purpose like would it save in time or money for the department?
In terms of time and money for the department, most of the sites are run by individuals who work, for example, like at universities that allow us to host these in their libraries. One of the problems that we've come up with that has been brought to my attention is there are space issues there are so many materials being sent to these sites that they can't house it. They have agreed to do so at no cost. It's a resource for us. So technically, in terms of finances, I don't think it saves us as much money as it would save, to be honest, the publishers. Because instead of the publishers having to print 10 copies of this for all over the state, have them shipped, some of these places they have to travel, unload. They're different sites that operate a little bit differently. It would be more of a convenience probably financially for them than for us. I think our biggest concern is to make sure that those materials are available immediately. They're the correct materials, and you don't have to be as concerned about an edition not being there or if a shipment has been late and a reviewer going to review materials and then not having access to them. Because I think in cases where that happens, regardless of where there might be an error, there are questions about possibly the transparency of this process. And by having everything online, I think that was the legislator's intent, was that everything available all the time to anyone.
Do we even know how many people actually went to the sites?
We do not. That's something we could look to do, is to poll. We don't have access to that information just on a daily basis. In my interactions, being new to this role, this is the first year I've been in this situation, I have been told it's been relatively quiet this year, that there have not been nearly as many public reviews as opposed to last year, I think, with social studies. So there has not been the demand from the public to review these materials for whatever reason. We have not received, as mentioned in the last meeting, we have not received one public review of a math textbook this cycle. So in that case, it lends me to believe that they have not been utilized as they have been in the past.
Monty, how will people be made aware of this change, that this is something new? I had somebody ask me yesterday about, I heard this was coming. When are we going to be told about it?
Well, if it happens, it would be shared in different avenues in terms of communication. Currently on our website, there's an entire page that's designated toward the information for these collection sites. So needless to say, that information would be shared immediately. In addition to that, we would talk to through our communications review as to what other outlets would be appropriate to share this, whether they're media outlets, whether they're different memos or updates that are sent to different counties, different directors. Of course, the sites would be contacted to where they would have information at those sites as well. So we would really make sure that we do a thorough and full briefing of everyone and making that information available as quickly as possible. And you're welcome. And we would have a transition time up until that first week of May or that first day of May, to where it wouldn't be just sudden. We would have until now, if that decision is made, until then, to communicate that effectively with the public.
Mr. Conkus.
Do the sites change every year, or are they normally the same place?
To my knowledge, they have not changed, but is that correct? They have stayed the same over time.
Do the sites have electronic access where they are currently?
They do. At some sites, they have to share those. They don't have them. Most sites don't have them designed specifically for those reviewers. Like, for example, at MTSU, which we would continue to use for hardback copies, if somebody wanted to use an electronic device and they did not bring their own to get on the free Wi-Fi, they would have to use a computer that is designated as a school library computer for the students at MTSU. Mm-hmm. So it's more of a sharing. It's not a designation.
Right. I guess my point was just the sites that are used currently would continue to be used, and they wouldn't have to change where they're at.
No, technically they wouldn't have to. Well, technically they wouldn't even have to be an official site unless they so chose to do so, because an individual could review from home. They could review from from a library. They could review from anywhere. I think one of the things we would investigate is if these sites still wanted to have that opportunity to assist the public if the public came in, because they might have a little bit more experience than, say, the local library, for example.
Any other questions for Mr. Wilson? Is this something that the commission will need to take on as an action item and vote on to enact, or is this something the department can do and we?
To my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but to my understanding, this is not something that has to have action item from the commission. However, we felt it was pertinent enough to bring it up to the commission for discussion to make sure that you were aware. As Mr. Moore said, sounded like he had heard that this was a possibility. So we wanted to bring that forth to you for discussion, to get any feedback that you have, and for us to have that information as we look forward to making a decision whether or not to move in that route or not. If that is a decision that is made by the department and we do move in that direction, then of course we would let everyone on the commission know so that they would have that information in real time as opposed to any changes that were made.
Okay, Dr. Robinson.
Just on a personal level, I like the idea. I think a lot of the frustration that we had during the last cycle was folks that would go to the sites and couldn't get the up-to-date information, and that was a lot of the complaints. So I like it online.
Dr. Moore.
I'd say the same thing, Monty. The feedback we got from a group, particularly in Williamson County, was really perturbed with what happened when they went out to review the books and the problems they encountered. So I would encourage you to move in that direction.
Well, I would say I thank you for that input. Being new in this role and not being a part of the social studies process in this position, it means a lot coming from those of you that were on it that had to field questions, possibly complaints from the public and constituents who were concerned about the process and access to that information. So thank you.
Thank you. Next item of the workshop is number 2, update on progress implementing 2014 textbook legislation. And Rebecca Wright is going to speak to this.
Commission members, I'll ask you to turn your packets under tab number 1 to page number 3. Tab number 1, page number 3, the top of the page says 2014 textbook legislation implementation update. So as many of you all are aware, in spring, this past spring 2014, the Tennessee General Assembly passed and the governor subsequently signed into law Public Chapter 981, which made some substantial revisions and changes to the state textbook review and approval, as well as the local adoption process. The department has been working with the commission over the past several months to implement some of these changes. The law will go into effect January 1st, 2015. Beginning on page 5 is a copy of the actual public chapter, but I'm going to go through just some of the highlights of the work that has been done over the past several months for each of these pieces. Item number 1, so the department, in consultation with the chairman of the commission, has conducted a review of the existing commission rules and policies and has made revisions, draft revisions to those policies and rules that have come before you all for approval on first read at your September 22nd meeting and are before you now on final read for the action items for the meeting this afternoon. Item number 2, a live streaming is required beginning January 1st for all commission meetings, as well as posting the archived meeting videos on the department's website. We began live streaming last meeting, and we will continue to do so throughout the 2015 and subsequent years. Appointment of new 2015 textbook commission members. So the commission will be vacated as of December 31st of this year, which means all members will now have to be appointed beginning January 1st of 2015. There are 3 appointing authorities, which is a change from the previous legislation. The governor's office appoints 3 members. The Speaker of the House will appoint 3 members, and then the Speaker of the Senate will appoint 3 members, and then the Commissioner of Education is the 10th member. The governor's office is coordinating all of those appointments between the 3 appointing authorities. Number 4, there will be a new training for all new commission members beginning in 2015 or 2015. The department has traditionally provided training to textbook commission members, but it is now a statutory requirement. Number 5, we are going to be updating all of the information on the Textbook Services website to reflect all of these changes. Number 6, there is a requirement now, beginning January 1st, that if there are errors identified in textbooks and instructional materials that have been placed on the state's approved list, then there has to be a method in place for members of the public or educators to be able to report those errors and then submit those to publishers to develop what's called corrective action plans. So the corrective action plan is actually listed as one of your policies that you all have approved on first read and will be before you today. And basically it's a process by which members of the public can, after reviewing the textbooks that are posted online, can submit feedback on those textbooks, and that information will then be forwarded to the department, who then pass it along to publishers, who then have to respond through a corrective action plan that is then brought to the State Board of Education for approval. Note that the specific things that can be identified in their comments are related to actual factual errors and grammatical errors of that nature. So there is a certain scope that the comments must be within. Number 7, the timeline for state review and approval has been somewhat adjusted to reflect some of the changes in state legislation. So the adoption schedule for the 2014-16 school year that is before you all as an action item at the meeting today aligns with that new schedule. And we've also developed a master schedule that is going to be presented before you by Mr. Wilson later on in the workshop. Number 8, as was mentioned previously by Mr. Wilson, the new legislation also requires online access to sample textbooks and instructional materials, both for the public and the state advisory panelists. So we are in the process, the department is in the process of developing a platform to facilitate the public and panelists access to those materials. They're going to be housed basically on the department's website, and as Mr. Wilson mentioned, we've already posted a form by which members of the public can present reviews of those materials online. And then we're in the work in consultation with the chairman of the Textbook Commission. The department has developed a policy to approve this process and revise the publisher contracts to reflect this new requirement. It is before you all today for final read. Number 9, so Mr. Wilson is in the process of updating all of the publisher communications and district forms to reflect these new statutory requirements. And then number 10, the department will be communicating with LEAs about all of these changes and making sure that textbook coordinators and directors of schools are aware of all the changes both to the state and to the local process. This will be done through communications as well as presentations at the Tennessee Lead Conference this year. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Any questions on the update on legislation? Okay, item 3 is the status of 2015 textbook commission appointments. And Chair recognizes Rebecca Wright again.
So this is going to be a quick update. There is no update right now on the status of the 2015 appointments. There have been, to date, the governor's office is coordinating all of those appointments, and we have not received final confirmation that any official appointments have yet been made for 2015, but we will keep you all apprised as soon as we hear word.
Okay, item 4 is the 2015 State Advisory Panelist Member Recruitment, and Monty Wilson.
Thank you. Monty Wilson, Deputy Director of Content and Resources, Curriculum and Instruction with the Tennessee Department of Education. As you may recall, at the last State Textbook Commission meeting, there was a new adoption cycle that was passed. So within the last 2 weeks, we have moved rather quickly to start preparing for that. And I wanted to just mention to you today that I have been in working with the CTE division very frequently in regards to moving this process along on schedule so that we are not delayed at all. What will happen starting this month, several individuals in the CTE department are currently working on both the screening instrument but also the application process for the advisory panel members. So what they will do is they will work to create those items, and once we have those items, of course, they will be allowed to be shared so we can start, especially with the recruitment piece, which is what this item is supposed to be discussing, we can start recruiting those educators in Tennessee to serve on that panel. What should happen at this point in time is that we hope to have that application available this month, at the very latest, the 1st of November, to where we can have that, to we can start to share that across Tennessee to our CTE educators who would qualify to serve on that committee, to where they could start to apply to serve as an advisory panel reviewer for the next round of textbooks. Normally, we accept those applications in January and December, or December and January of each year, school year, and then in February we collect those and we start to review them. I know last year, I believe Mr. Moore helped review those for math. So we include individuals from different areas to sit and review those applications and make those selections. The number of applicants is, we try to select as many of those as needed to accommodate the number of bids that we accept per textbook. And for next year, with Section A, we'll discuss this later, but with CTE, there are 4 different clusters that will be in the adoption process. There's advanced manufacturing and subjects, information technology, human services, and education and training. With those clusters, there are so many courses that are available. So, for example, with advanced manufacturing subjects, there are 11 different courses. So that could be 11 different textbooks bid by, for example, one publisher for the next cycle in just that one cluster. So while on paper it may not look like there are a lot of books that may be bid or a lot of courses that may be bid, there's going to be a total of 22, 45, if my math is correct, 45 different courses in Tennessee that would have textbooks and instructional materials that would be part of the adoption process for next year. So at this point, if you have any questions in regards to that panelist member recruitment, I will be happy to answer. We will rely heavily on the CTE division to assist us with that recruitment, since they are very connected and grounded to those teachers. Communications will be sent out in several different ways to try and attract the best educators to review these textbooks for next year.
Have y'all talked about how, I know that with math, the department kind of stepped up the screening process and had quite a application process that demanded teachers show their effectiveness in the classroom. Will you do something similar with?
I believe that is the plan at this point in time. As the chair mentioned, this year for math, there was almost 3 parts of the application which had not been done before. For those that didn't know, I'll just review those real briefly. The first part was a narrative, which was, of course, why do you want to do this? Tell us a little bit about yourself, but also show us how you have achieved in producing student growth in your mathematics classroom. The second phase of that application was to take a math task appropriate for that grade level and complete that and show that you understood not how just that math problem worked and should be solved, but also aligning that to the standards that our teachers should be teaching from. And then the third piece was to create your own math task and align that to our standards, to where not only did they understand how to complete a task, but they could create one as well. So that was the process for mathematics, and that was very different than what's been done in the past. I actually was invited to speak to the CTE division at one of their division meetings, and I shared that with them talked about how much rigor was involved in that application process and how we really felt we got better reviewers than we had in the past, and they are looking to mimic that. It will be a little different because CTE doesn't have data that reflects their content area as directly as math teachers would, but they're trying to make a 2 to 3 step application process that would be much more rigorous than what they've used in the past.
Yeah, I was thinking if they could demonstrate how they've incorporated Common Core literacy standards, for example, would be a good.
That was yes, that is one of the areas that we discussed, because that would show a connection, and that would be a way for teachers, because schools do have literacy scores where CTE teachers do have a part in how those scores come to be with how they promote literacy in the classroom. So I believe that's something that they're looking at both for the application, and they also are taking that very serious in regards to their discussions and development of the screening instrument as well. So it would need to be in both of those, I believe.
Any questions for Mr. Wilson on this one? All right, thank you. And if you'll just stay where you are there.
I will. Thank you.
Item 5 is the Master Textbook Annual Calendar. And the chair recognizes you.
At this time, if you would look under tab 2, page 15, since I have been a part of this division, there have been a lot of questions as to what happens when in regards to the textbook adoption process. And we always have a very specific cycle that the commission approves for that certain area. For mathematics, we're just concluding that calendar, but it's very detailed, month by month, date by date, what happens for that subject. But sometimes that can be difficult to read for somebody who doesn't know as much about that subject, or they're just not as likely to look at that document for understanding. So I spent some time actually working with Rebecca Wright, so I would like to give her credit on this as well. We sat down and we tried to take the requirements of what is involved in the textbook annual calendar, looking at a January to December of what happens each month or what should happen each month. And some months can be a little gray depending on when certain meetings take place or different things. But what we've done is we took what happened at different levels, what happens for publishers, what happens for LEAs, and what happens for the Department of Education. And we've tried to map that out month by month as to the key events each month as to what would happen, so that we can be more upfront, more transparent with somebody that has questions, and we can refer them to this document as a starting place. The more specific document would be the document that we look at during our regular session for Cycle A. But what this does is it gives someone a close look at what happens. And while we were creating with this, Rebecca was able to take all the policy that has been adopted or that we currently had in place or that was new and make sure that everything fit accordingly to policy. So if something is going to be due at a certain time, we reflect that in the calendar so that it would be prepared by that date, and we're not waiting to the last minute, or we're not caught that, oh, we've forgotten this was an important thing we needed to do. So we wanted to really just bring that to your attention. It's not anything that needs or that we're not seeking your approval on, but it is a resource that we're going to start sharing with districts and with the public. It will be online, and we will be sending that out and sharing that actually this month at the lead session for educators.
It's very helpful. Thank you. Item 6 is the publisher agreement textbook contracts. Chair recognizes Elizabeth Taylor.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Taylor, and I am the staff attorney for the Tennessee Department of Education. As I'm sure everyone is aware, there have been some recent changes to the legislation regarding the adoption of textbooks. So what the Office of General Counsel is involved in now is comparing the existing contracts and updating them so that they comply with the new legislation regarding publishers' agreements and contracts by for publishing.
Any questions for Ms. Taylor? And next on the agenda is the revised Department of Education textbook communications and policies. And number 7, revised waiver protocol and update on district waivers. Chair recognizes Monty Wilson.
Monty Wilson, Deputy Director, Content Resources with the Department of Education. If you would please turn to Section 3 in your binder. What you will see is the guidelines for use of textbooks and instructional materials not on contract, which means this is basically the process for applying for a textbook waiver. Just so you know, maybe a little context, especially for those that are new on the commission, the state received more waivers this year than they ever have, based on the fact that social studies didn't have as many offerings as in past years. So we had quite a few districts that applied for a waiver. Unfortunately, what we found is because of the number of waivers we received, there were a lot of questions and that the process was quite confusing. So we took this opportunity to try to look at our waiver process and streamline that to some degree to make it easier for districts to understand the process, which hopefully also makes it easier for them to complete the process. If you look at page 20, there are 2 process options for a waiver. Currently, we had 3. So the new waiver option deletes that 3rd process. Process 1 would be for districts to use when they wish to apply when there are no textbooks or instructional materials available on the list of textbooks and instructional materials that is approved by the State Board of Education. To use social studies as an example, there are many social studies textbooks or courses that may be electives that did not have a textbook bid for whatever reason, because it's a very small class, or there are small offerings of that class. So there wasn't a book available. So they request a waiver for a book because there was not one provided for them. Process 2 is a little different. That is for use when a school or district chooses to adopt a textbook or instructional materials in lieu of titles that were available on that official list from the state board. In this case, for example, a school district or a school could opt to choose a textbook that is not approved by the State Board of Education. One example of that, just for reference, would be that last year with social studies for K2, there was only one option, which really does not make that an option. So some districts looked at other options, and if they felt that a series or curriculum resources and materials were better than the one on the state list, they could apply for a waiver for that. So that would be process 2. Process 3, which we are no longer including, was for textbooks that were previously adopted. Well, if they were previously adopted, there's no need for them to be readopted. They're using a book that's currently been approved. The only difference is of course, that book would no longer be under contract, but that's the district's decision whether or not they wanted to use that or not. So that's how we went from 3 to 2. And then what we have is we have 1 page of guidelines on page 21. And then we have very short process guidelines on page 22 and 23 for process 1 for page 22 and process 2 for page 23. And then on page 24 is a much simpler form that districts would return to the Tennessee Department of Education. If you remember the other page, it was about twice as much information, a lot of repetitive language. So we cleaned that up to make it just much simpler. And what we're hoping is that districts don't have as many questions and don't have to spend as much time on paperwork as they did in this past year just trying to understand and then complete. And our goal is to share this information with districts somewhat immediately. This will be part of what we present at the LEAD conference to share with districts. We also are planning to possibly film a webinar to where we can have this for those that don't come, to where that information is on a link that's on the Tennessee Department website under the textbook section, to where we can direct coordinators or directors to watch that at their convenience and explain that process from beginning to end and hopefully erase any confusion in regards to what has happened in the past or what we're asking to occur in the future.
Mr. Wilson, if I'm a district representative wanting to apply for a waiver, what do I have to do in addition to filling out this form and submitting it to you?
The biggest piece is as they are going through their review process, because as of right now, districts are in the process of forming their review committees at the local level. So as those at the local level are reviewing, if they're seeing that what is on the list, what they're reviewing doesn't meet their needs, and they're aware of something else, then they're allowed to review that material as well. And if that local review committee would like to adopt one of those books, they could do so. They could take that to their board for approval to seek permission for the waiver. What we're going to make sure that those districts know is that when reviewing that, they should be using the same review instrument that we used this summer for the math textbooks, because that is available. So when we talk about this process, we're going to talk about how we are able to share with them that rubric, and we're also going to have a training piece on that rubric at LEAD as well. I'll update with you a little more about that later. But basically, it would follow the same process. They would just do it at a local level on that new resource that we did not do here. And then basically what happens is their board has to approve it. They would sign and submit that form, and in addition to that, they have to provide correlations to show that instructional resource material matches the standards that are adopted in Tennessee, so that students are being supported in those standards, and they have to provide us with a copy of those resources, whether it's electronic or whether it's hard print. They would have to give us access to that, because if it was approved by the department, if everything went through and it was finally approved, then we would have to include that as to what the public could also review. It would not be something that was not available. So we would make that available for public review as well. I hope that answered your question. If not, you'll probably ask me another.
So yes, it's not so easy as to just submit this form with the book that
No.
the resource they want to use.
No, it should not be, no. They have to actually, like I said, there has to be work to show where the teachers have actually dug into the content of that instructional resource and material, and they have to show how it aligns with the standards that we have. So it's not a simple, we like this book, here it is. They have to have that supporting evidence.
Okay. Chair recognizes Dr. Robinson.
And Monty, that process is on page 23, correct, the narrative?
Yes, it is. On process 1 and 2, it does go into more detail, and if you look under process 2 at Roman numeral 3, there are safeguards to assure that certain things are in place. Continued availability of the book over the life of the contract, quality of the binding, and then the policy for replacement of defective materials. That deals with the specs of the book. But then they also have to have, for example, the fourth bullet down, they have to have a comment on the correlations, meaning a narrative to address that. So if they submitted something and half the standards for fourth grade were not included, that would be something that they would share with us and that the department would look at and take into consideration and whether or not that would be approved or not.
Okay, Chair recognizes Dr. Ruffin.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Is there a timeline that you're going to use once a waiver is requested?
It would follow the same timeline as it would for adoption. So that would be part of the information that we'd be sure and share. Currently, LEAs are required to submit their adoption, what they're choosing, by April 15th of each year. So districts that are choosing publisher X, but for grades 6, 7, and 8 request a waiver, all of that information would come in at the same time. And that would be for our benefit, but also for the local benefit, so that that Board of Education and that director and that committee could have everything at one point in time. So what we're going to do is when we roll this out in a few weeks at the State Lead Conference, is we're going to make sure that they understand that that timeline is in fact a mirror of the same timeline for adopting books that are on the list. It should not occur after the fact. They should be done in simultaneous fashion.
Thank you. And one additional question, is there an appeals process to this, or is the approval or disapproval of that waiver final?
At this point, if a waiver is approved, it is final. An appeal process is something that would have to be looked at if appeals were being, or if waivers were being denied. So that is, we are still in the process of making sure that we have all the steps in place. Because we have not received as many waivers as we have in the past, I'm not sure if that has necessarily been something that was an issue at a certain point in time. But we're cognizant that that could be, and we're going to make sure that we plan accordingly for that.
Mr. Wilson, we're going to vote on the list for math in our meeting, and you mentioned that a district who wanted to use a resource not on that list, okay, what if it was reviewed already by the state, our state advisory panel, and it did not meet both criteria, so therefore potentially not on the list? How would that process work if the LEA said we would like to use that? They would get the rubric and their own reviewers would have to review it again?
Basically, they would have to follow the same process, and that would be I just turned my page, so forgive me a second. That would be the same thing as process, that would fall under process 2. They were looking to choose a book that was not on the official list by state board. The majority of the time, that would probably be a book that did not go through the process. If I understand your question correctly, you're asking if a book did go through the process but did not make the official list and a district opted to choose that book, what process would follow? They would follow the same process where they would have to try and provide the information to show that, in their opinion, it's their belief that the book met those pieces of the screening instrument that were found not satisfactory by the state review or advisory panel. That could still go to the state, their school board. It could be signed off on it, and we could get that waiver. That waiver would be reviewed and looked at just like any other. At this point in time, the only thing I'm confident in speaking of is in terms of waiver approval is that that comes through the commissioner. So that decision would be left up to him, and he would be aware, of course, that that book did not make it through this process that we are concluding, but that District Y has chosen it anyway, and here's the evidence supporting their decision.
Okay. Chair recognizes Emily Barton.
Thank you, Commission members. Emily Barton, Assistant Commissioner for Curriculum and Instruction. I just wanted to reference that in law, the waiver authority is rested with the Commissioner of Education, and we are in the process of determining the internal process for that waiver review, and more information will be shared by the end of this year. So the Commission and the Commissioner are charged with ensuring standards alignment, and that will continue to be part of the review. And the review information about all books will be publicly available, knowing that it's important for districts to have the information about the review process that was complete. So the specifics of that approval process for the waiver are being determined by the Commissioner and his office. However, the process, as Mr. Wilson mentioned, has been streamlined. And for both books that have been in areas where there are not books available, and for books that are in areas where there are books available, there will be a formal review process by the Office of the Commissioner.
Thank you. Any questions? Any other questions? Thank you. Item 8 is the publisher communications and documents for the next adoption cycle. Chair recognizes Monty Wilson.
At this time, as alluded to earlier, we have the new adoption cycle, so we're currently in the process of preparing documents and information to share with publishers about the Cycle A adoption, those CTE courses I referenced earlier. At this time in your packet, you do have one of those first documents in draft form behind tab 3 on page 25. You have what is called our intent to bid document. This document has been almost completely revised at this point in time, not just for content, but also in structure, trying to make it easier to understand for everyone. And this document's purpose is to try and help us determine how many bids we expect to receive. It is the first piece of communication that is shared with publishers, official piece of communication that is shared with publishers about the upcoming bid. This will be shared with publishers, if not this month, in very early November, and we will be asking them to share with us what they believe they believe they plan to bid on for the upcoming year. And that is very important for us. It is a non-binding document. So it's just their intent. Yes, I'm intending to do this. They're not required. We also don't have to get this from a publisher who does not know they're going to bid yet. It's almost a courtesy to us, because what it allows us to do, as mentioned earlier, we have to have ample number of reviewers selected to review all of these materials. So it helps us determine whether or not our pool of applicants for the advisory panel is large enough or not. And if it's not, if we have so many bids we're expecting to come in and not enough reviewers, then what we have to do is work towards attracting and recruiting more, so we have not just enough, but enough high-quality educators to give these textbooks the best review possible for teachers and students in Tennessee. So that is the first piece of information they will get. The invitation to bid, which is the formal bid process, is currently under major revision. After doing some work, it came to our attention that we had one of the more complicated invitation to bids being offered in states. So we are completely trying to redo our invitation to bid to make it easier for publishers. I have actually asked publishers to give me specific comments on how we could improve it. I've asked publishers to connect me with states who do a better job than we do, because I have no problem trying to get other states to let us use and piggyback on some of their work if publishers have said someone else's process is better than ours. I feel like we owe it to them and we owe it to ourselves to have a process that's open to everyone and that is easy to participate in, to where we get as many bids as possible. That invitation to bid will be completed in December. Will be shared, and then as of right now, we have scheduled our pre-bid conference for January 12th of 2015. And at that conference, we would go over everything involved in the new adoption Cycle A, everything that is in regard to that bid. All the forms would be updated. Everything would be basically up to date and current, so they can start to have their bids available for submission in mid-May. If you have any questions about anything I mentioned or in general, I would be happy to try to answer those, but I would say that publishers have been very honest and open with providing feedback toward our department, towards myself, which is something I appreciate, and hopefully this time next year things will be even smoother than they were this year. So that's our goal each and every year.
Thank you. Any questions? Chair recognizes Rebecca Wright.
And just to clarify one point, the department will be sending the invitation to bid draft materials to the commission for your all review before it's actually sent out to publishers.
Okay, now we're going to shift to the meeting agenda and materials coming up at 12:30. Number 9 is October the 6th Commission meeting agenda items. Chair recognizes Emily Barton.
Good morning, Commission. Emily Barton, Assistant Commissioner for Curriculum and Instruction. The purpose of my testimony is simply to refresh your sense of the process that was used to review the math textbooks, given that this is the final read action item on your agenda today. A few notes. The role of the State Textbook Commission is to adopt a list of textbooks and instructional materials to recommend to the State Board of Education for approval. These books are then available for district use. However, districts, as Mr. Wilson mentioned, have the option of a waiver. And the commission appointed an expert panel of Tennessee educators to review all textbooks and materials and approved the screening instrument that the state review would be based on. These reviewers were selected through a rigorous application process, received in-depth training, and 100% of the reviewers at the conclusion of their training felt comfortable and confident using the rubric to review books. The reviewers completed extensive work across the summer to review each and every book with care. They reviewed not only the books but also the online materials. And the review was focused on reviewing against the state academic standards and to ensure that the books are free of any clear, substantive, factual, or grammatic error. Parents and community members had the opportunity to review the materials and submit any comments to the commission. And this process this year, which was approved by this commission, did differ from past processes in a couple of key ways. The first is that it was a non-negotiable review for the key components of focus and rigor. And the spirit of the review came from a place of believing that being on the Tennessee State Textbook List is a recognition of quality that must be earned, not a right that is given to all who bid. The review was rigorously conducted, and in order to make sure that the process was fair to publishers, all publishers had equal opportunity to make revisions based on feedback provided from the commission-appointed expert panel. The textbook Publishers all received feedback on the non-negotiables. And in a unique process element in the state of Tennessee, the textbook publishers then had an opportunity to change their bid and to make revisions based on the very thoughtful feedback that was provided. Some publishers chose to make changes. Some publishers did not. Some publishers chose to debate the feedback. However, the feedback was offered constructively in a true spirit of partnership, believing that the having high-quality instructional materials for students in Tennessee will require a joint collaboration and will be improved based on feedback. Therefore, the publishers had this window of time to make changes and resubmit. Many did. The expert panelists then re-reviewed the changes and submit to you their final review. I'm happy to entertain any questions about the process before you go to your vote later today.
Questions for Ms. Barton? Thank you. Chair recognizes Rebecca Wright.
Members, in your packet under tab number 4, page 27 is the agenda for your meeting this afternoon. The meeting begins at 12:30, and the action items on the agenda are the adoption of the agenda, the approval of the September 22nd meeting minutes, the official list of math textbooks, the 2014-16 textbook adoption schedule, and that is in alignment with the cycle that you all approved at your last meeting. The schedule will be for computer science, tech engineering, and instructional technology. And then final read of the commission rules and policies. There were 2 changes to the commission rules and policies since they were approved on first read. The first change is to the definitions. We added in the definitions of the textbooks and instructional resources in section F of policy 2.1, which is the publisher policy. And that was done in consultation with the chairman of the commission. And then also in policy 2.400, the language that required the commission to state that the date that the publisher corrective action plans are submitted to the state board for approval be included in the textbook schedule was removed, so that now the commission would only need to just approve the date but not actually include it in the adoption schedule that you all have on your action item for this afternoon. And then going on, flipping the page to page number 28, announcements and notices are more information about the textbook lead sessions, going through the actual 2015 textbook schedule and meeting dates of the commission, other business, and then adjournment. I'm happy to entertain and answer any questions that you all have about any of the items on the meeting agenda this afternoon.
Ms. Wright, I think the loose leaf agenda may not have the back as the one in the binder does. Is that what you all are finding? Okay. So just should we pull that out?
Yes, if you want to pull out the actual meeting agenda from page 27 and 28, our apologies for the oversight.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion on commission rules and policies or of the math textbook list before we recess and get prepared for the meeting at 12:30? Okay. We will recess now and come back for our meeting at 12:30. Do we need to have a motion to do that?
We just conclude the workshop.
We're concluding this workshop. All right. Thank you. Good afternoon. It's time to begin this meeting of the State Textbook Commission. Just as a reminder to our commission members that we'll follow order, rules of order, and if you will, as we go through the agenda and have speakers or you want to have some discussion or ask questions, just signal me or Rebecca. We'll make sure everyone's voice is heard. Rebecca Wright will call roll at this time. The chair recognizes Rebecca Wright.
All right. Dr. Ruffin? Here. Ms. Street? Here. Mr. Conkis? Here. Dr. Robinson? Here. Mr. Moore? Here. Or Dr. Moore, excuse me. Mr. Huffman? And Dr. Hammond?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 present and you have a quorum.
Thank you. First action item is the adoption of the agenda for today. And do I have a motion that we adopt the agenda?
Verna Ruffin, I so move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Thank you. Second?
Shannon Street, second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Action item 2 is the September 22nd, 2014 meeting minutes. Chair recognizes Rebecca Wright.
Members, the minutes of the September 22nd Textbook Commission meeting are in your packet under tab 4, page number 29. These are the minutes that you also received following the last meeting, the week of the 22nd as well.
There's no questions or discussion. A motion to approve the September 22nd meeting minutes.
Motion to approve the September 22nd meeting minutes.
Thank you. Anyone second?
Verna Ruffin, I second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Okay. Action carries. September 22nd meeting minutes are approved. Is there a motion to hear action item 3, the official list of math textbooks? We will need to move to hear this item.
Shannon Street, move to hear item number 4, or number 3, excuse me, the official list of mathematics textbooks.
Thank you. Is anyone second?
Verna Ruffin, I will second that.
Okay. So we will hear this agenda item, the official list of math textbooks, and Chair calls on Monty Wilson.
Monty Wilson, Deputy Director, Content Resources for the Tennessee Department of Education. At this time, the official list of math textbooks is on the agenda. As you know, the State Textbook Commission is tasked with adopting a list of textbooks to recommend to the State Board of Education for approval. The current adoption cycle for mathematics textbooks and instructional resources. At this time, all Commission members should have received the reviews for the textbooks from the advisory panel. In addition to that, you've heard from the publishers who chose to speak at the last Textbook Adoption Committee. You also, since that meeting, have received copies of the publishers' responses to Section 2 of the reviews. At this point, I can answer any questions you might have, if you have any. in regards to an official list that would need to be ready for State Board for the October 31st meeting for approval.
Any discussion or questions at this time for Mr. Wilson? Okay, Mr. Conkus.
After our last meeting, I looked into a handful of things based off of some questions that I had on the textbook review and the textbooks, and I was just going to share a couple of facts that I found interesting. First was I looked into the rubric itself, and as a high school math teacher, I have to say that I have appreciation for what the rubric is trying to do, with regard especially to the rigor and the focus. As a teacher here in the state of Tennessee, I look at my students and I notice over the past 3 years when they implemented or began to implement Common Core in mathematics education for junior high and elementary schools, and then last year the core coaches, the way that we implemented across the state. One of the main focuses was rigor. And if you look at our NAEP results over the past few years, especially the last few, we were the fastest improving state in the nation on NAEP. And I would say that's in no small part to the amount of rigor and focus that we put into the classrooms and into instructional strategies. And so I found that to be actually very important. And I think that rubric is very state-specific for us as Tennessee teachers. I also have to say, after looking through the process and the way that the reviewers were selected, it's not unlike the process to become a Common Core coach did a lot of the implementation trainings over the past 3 summers, where they had to design their own task, align that to standards, and do those things. It's a pretty rigorous thing, and I have to definitely trust that process. In saying that, I would say that I personally, as a math teacher and having gone through a similar process, I appreciate that process. Just as a teacher and trying to keep kids moving forward and being better than what they currently are. So that's pretty much what I've found. I've talked to multiple resources on this and tried to do the best I could in researching what we have. But I do appreciate those things and the work the reviewers have done and through the rubric.
Thank you. Any other discussion or questions on this? Is there any objection to calling for a motion? One clarifying point here. If someone is going to put forward a motion, you will need to specify whether you're moving to approve the full list or just those who pass sections 1 and 2 reviews. Okay, our reviewers reviewed the full list. Some textbooks put forth were passed sections 1 and 2 reviews, and some only passed section 1. So when you we need to move on this action item, make sure you specify which list you're moving that we adopt. Okay, I'm going to present a motion that we as a commission approve the reviews that have been submitted by our textbook review panel. So only those who passed both elements of the rubric 1 and 2. That's the motion. So you want to second that?
Jason Robinson, I would like to second that.
Okay, we will do a roll call vote at this time.
Dr. Ruffin?
Aye.
Ms. Street?
Aye.
Mr. Conkus?
Aye.
Dr. Robinson?
Aye.
Dr. Moore?
Aye.
And Chairman Hammond?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 ayes.
Okay, so that motion carries. The next action item on the agenda is for the 2014 through 16 textbook adoption schedule. This is the CTE schedule, and we need to have a motion to discuss this item.
Motion to discuss CTE schedule.
Okay, second.
I second.
Chair recognizes Monty Wilson again.
Thank you. Monty Wilson, Tennessee Department of Education, Deputy Director of Content and Resources. If I could direct the Commission to tab 6 of their folders, page 37. You will find a document titled Tennessee Textbook and Instructional Materials Adoption Schedule, Section A, 2014 through 2016. This document lists the dates of events that we would adhere to in regards to the textbook adoption cycle for advanced manufacturing, information and technology, human services, and education and training. This would actually become effective immediately with work to do here in October. And as you see at the end, it would conclude in April 15 of 2016 with local adoptions for these textbooks. This schedule was created working with the CTE department and looking at past schedules and looking at legislation to make sure that if this schedule is approved, that we will be following policy in terms of any dates that are required along the way throughout that year and a half process.
Questions for Mr. Wilson? Any objections to calling for a motion? This will be a motion to approve this schedule.
Move to approve the 2014-16 textbook adoption schedule for CTE.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Street. Anyone second?
I second that motion.
Okay. Chair recognizes Rebecca Wright for a vote.
Dr. Ruffin?
Aye.
Ms. Street?
Aye.
Mr. Conkus?
Aye.
Dr. Robinson?
Aye.
Dr. Moore?
Aye.
And Chairman Hammond?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 ayes.
Okay, the motion carries. The last action item on the agenda is 5 Textbook Commission Rules and Policies final read. We'll need a motion to hear this agenda item.
Move to hear the textbook commission rules and policies final read.
Thank you. Does anyone second?
Verna Ruffin, I second that.
Yeah, thank you. The chair recognizes Rebecca Wright.
Rebecca Wright, Tennessee Department of Education. Members, in your packets, beginning in tab 7 on page 39, are the Textbook Commission rules and policies that are before you on second and final read. These policies were approved by the Commission on first read during the September 22nd Commission meeting. There have been 2 slight revisions to the policies since you approved them on first read. One is to the publisher policy. It's 2100 Section F, and it is on page... Excuse me one second. If you go to page 58, at the bottom of the page, definitions for what the basal text, co-basal text, and alternative level text were added into the policy. These are definitions that have been traditionally used in the publisher communication documents and are now going to be added to policy as part of the Commission's policies. And then one other slight change to section to 2400, policy 2400, which is on page 64. So in the previous policy, there was a requirement, the one that you approved on first read, that the Commission approved the date by which the department submitted publishers' corrective action plans to the state board, that it be included within the textbook adoption schedule. That language was removed so that now the Commission only has to approve the date. It does not have to be included in the textbook adoption schedule. And I can answer any questions about the policies or rules at this time. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Wright? Does anyone object to calling for the question to approve these textbook commission rules and policies final read? Anyone move to approve?
Verna Ruffin, I move to approve the Textbook Commission rules and policies on the final read.
Anyone second?
Shannon Street, second.
Okay, Ms. Wright, if you'll call a roll call.
Dr. Ruffin?
Aye.
Ms. Street?
Aye.
Mr. Conkus?
Aye.
Dr. Robinson?
Aye.
Dr. Moore?
Aye.
Chairman Hammond?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 ayes.
Thank you. The motion carries. Those are all the action items on our agenda today. The announcements and notices section. Textbook lead sessions. Chair recognizes Monty Wilson.
Monty Wilson, Deputy Director of Content and Resources for the Tennessee Department of Education. We wanted to share with the Commission that the LEAD conference sponsored by the Tennessee Department of Education is October 27th through 29th. And there will be, we shared with you earlier, there were going to be 3 sessions that we would be presenting on textbooks. Those will all be taking place on Monday, October 27th. And in addition to that, we now have added a session for October 29th, and that session will be a 3-hour session, which will be a combination of the previous 3, so that those attending who might like to hear something else and might not could attend all 3 at one time could come at one session and hear an overview of all 3 in one 3-hour session. And we also are planning to add to that session to include some training for districts to assist them in their local review, including discussing the rubric that was used for Tennessee with the math adoption, which would allow them to have a better understanding at the local level of that rubric.
Okay, thank you. The 2015 textbook schedule and meeting dates.
Yes, Monty Wilson, Deputy Director of Content and Resources for Tennessee Department of Education. just recently, we looked at page 37 under section 6. If I could draw your attention back to that document, by approving this document, it also approves some of the next meeting dates for the Textbook Commission. I'm going to just bring those to your attention along with a couple of other dates of importance that you may wish to go ahead and mark on your calendar. The first of those dates is the January 12th, 2015 date, which would be the pre-bid conference for Section A. Commission members would be invited to attend that conference, which is designed for publishers, so they understand the bidding process for the textbook cycle that is forthcoming. February 11th and 12th will be when we have the advisory panel review and selection, and most of the time we try to include individuals from the commission, so we would probably be seeking assistance for that review. Those dates, a date that doesn't affect you directly, March 3rd, 2015, would be the deadline for the delivery of official bids for Section A, and that would be at 10 a.m. that morning. We would have to have those into our offices. March 23rd of 2015 would actually be the next official meeting date for the commission at this point in time. May 9th and 10th, we would have orientation and training for textbook reviewers. It would also include standards review for the CTE courses that are being bid, and that weekend we also hope to have publisher presentations as well. If you turn to the back, it would be an official meeting date, August 24th and 25th of 2015. That meeting date would include receiving the advisory panel's final reviews for Section A, and also allow for the publishers to comment at that point in time. And then the next meeting would be September 14th of 2015, which would be a recommendation of books for Section A. So with that, you have the 3 next official commission meeting dates, but also some other dates that you would be invited to attend or that would be extremely pertinent to the work of the commission. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions for Ms. Wilson? Okay, thank you. As Mr. Wilson said, March the 23rd is the next commission meeting, and so there will be a new commission in January, but that new commission will meet at that time. Any other business from any commission members? Okay, thank you. You were adjourned.